What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex Yu, and in this video, I don't have any news updates for the production of Transformers 5, but instead there is something else that is quite interesting that I would like to discuss. But before I do that, I want to make a couple of really quick shoutouts to two very awesome Ragin Nation members. In no particular order, I'd like to say thank you to Jenna. Thank you, Jenna, for remembering my birthday. Last weekend, I celebrated my birthday, and what Jenna did was that she went to my Instagram account and commented on one of the photos wishing me a happy birthday. And when I read it, it brought a smile to my face. So I just want to say thank you very much. It was really sweet, and I appreciate the fact that you remembered. So thank you very much, Jenna. I had a great birthday, by the way. And also, I want to say thank you to Michaela for sharing with me this really detailed account of her meeting with Peter Cullen and Frank Welker. That was awesome. I met Peter Cullen at TFCon in Toronto last month, and I still remember it quite clearly. It was an amazing event, but when it was over, I was quite sad. And then she shared with me her journey, and when I say journey, believe me, it was a journey, because she documented it so well in full detail from beginning to end. So anyways, when I read it, I felt exactly what you're feeling. I know exactly what you went through, and I felt like I was there. So thank you very much, Michaela, for taking the time to document the entire experience. I really enjoyed reading that, and if you'd like to read it, I'm going to leave you the link on the description box below so you can relive her experience. And once again, thank you very much, Michaela, for sharing that experience with me. And that is something that is very, very special, and I'm sure that you will always remember it. All right? I hope everybody else eventually has the opportunity to meet somebody that you look up to or that you idolize. So once again, thank you very much, Jenna and Michaela, for being awesome Ragin Nation members. And thank you to everybody else once again for supporting me. So right now we're going to discuss something that was brought to my attention from Ragin Nation member Ahmad Haran. And I'm going to read this to you, okay? Alex, I'd like to hear your thoughts about Transformers Age of Extinction. In my opinion, it was fun and entertaining movie, although the plot could have been better, and it was definitely better than second film. And as for the third film in comparison, I'm not sure. What you think, Alex? Is Age of Extinction better than Dark of the Moon, or the opposite? I do agree about the writing on Age of Extinction, as it was very lazy writing. Very good question. Now, the reason why I think it's a very good question is because of the fact that it's being brought up right now in 2015, at least a year after Transformers Age of Extinction has been released. Now, keep in mind that I enjoy all of these films. I thought they're all very entertaining. Of course, some of them are better than the others, and some of them are just not very, very good at all, like Revenge of the Fallen. But deep down inside, the very first one will always be the best. But this topic is about comparing Age of Extinction with Dark of the Moon, and essentially asking the question, which is the better sequel? We're not even going to talk about Revenge of the Fallen because that was a big mess within itself. So that is not even going to be discussed in this video. We're going to compare Age of Extinction with Dark of the Moon. And you guys have already seen both of my reviews for Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction, so you know how I feel about both of them. But it's been at least a year, and the big question is, how do I feel about it now? I saw Dark of the Moon in the theaters, I think probably 9 times. Maybe more, I can't remember. I think it was 9. And then I saw Transformers Age of Extinction 11 or 12 times in the theater, most of which was watched in IMAX 3D. Which is the director's intention of the way it should be presented. So, you know what? I enjoyed every single one of those experiences, and I wanted to go back again and again because I wanted to relive that again. But now, like I said, at least a year has passed. I've watched it a couple more times on Blu-ray, and the big question is, what do I think of it now? And in my review, I said that, you know what? Age of Extinction is a really, really great Transformers live-action film. It's not better than the first one, but when you compare it with Dark of the Moon, I find that it has more Transformers moments, thus making it greater than Dark of the Moon. But after watching it some more and more and more, and then watching Dark of the Moon, some of my opinions might change about that, and that is what we're going to discuss in this video, in a video segment that I'd like to call Dark of the Moon versus Age of Extinction, which is the better Transformers sequel. Alright, so what I have here is a scoring system. A scoring system out of 20 based on 20 different criteria. And if one is better than the other, then it'll get a point. And at the end of it all, we'll find out, we'll tally up all the points, and whichever sequel has the most points will be that better sequel, in my opinion. And then you could tell me in the comments section below which you think is better. Okay? So, let's just start off with opening sequence. Which is the better opening sequence, okay? Dark of the Moon had the Cybertron sequence, which was awesome. I thought that was a great opening sequence because we got to see a bit of the history with how the Transformers came to be. All right, or rather why they went to Earth, okay? And you have Optimus Prime's narration, so that was really, really cool. And then for Age of Extinction, we had the dinosaur sequence, the extinction of the dinosaurs, which I thought was a really different spin on the whole extinction of dinosaur theory. Of course, it's all fictional, but I like what they did with that. It didn't have Optimus Prime's narration, so it felt very different, and it was also quite quick. And once it was done, it was done. It was a really short sequence. But I gotta give points to Dark of the Moon for the better opening sequence. The Cybertron sequence was really cool. It made me go, wow, that was cool. The Age of Extinction was cool, but I gotta say the Cybertron sequence in Dark of the Moon was better. So that's 1 point for Dark of the Moon. Alright, number 2 is the human cast. What do I think of the human cast? In Dark of the Moon, you got Shia LaBeouf, and you have Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, and then, of course, you have Tyrese and Josh Duhamel versus Mark Wahlberg and company, okay? Which is the better human cast? Well, you know what? We've seen Shia LaBeouf a number of times. He just gets more and more annoying as we get into the sequels. And then you change up Megan Fox and give us Rosie Huntington-Whiteley after we felt a little bit more connected with the Megan Fox-Shia LaBeouf duo. And then we see Tyrese only near the end of the film, like in the third act. So I felt it was a little bit more disconnected, and I also felt that, I was starting to get a little bit tired of Shia LaBeouf. And then we get introduced to Mark Wahlberg and co. While I thought that Mark Wahlberg's daughter and the boyfriend were quite weak, and I don't think Mark Wahlberg really was that great of a character to begin with, I do appreciate the fact that we're seeing something new. So this point will have to go to Age of Extinction. Okay, so Age of Extinction gets the point for that. The human story in Dark of the Moon. The human story is about Sam Witwicky wanting to matter. Okay, he's done so much, but he's amounted to really nothing, and he wants to do something that matters, and I appreciate that. Okay. Even though I don't care that much about it, I appreciate that. I appreciate it more than Mark Wahlberg's wanting to provide for his family, because you really don't see a whole lot of that going on. He doesn't really struggle. He just goes along with the Autobots. So I'm going to have to give this one to Dark of the Moon. So another point for Dark of the Moon. The overall story, okay? The story is, the ultimate story is bringing Cybertron to Earth and preventing that from happening versus the Decepticons, or rather Galvatron, trying to terraform Hong Kong and the entire world in Age of Extinction, okay? I felt that bringing Cybertron to Earth was a bigger story because you saw how it led up to that. With the terraforming in Age of Extinction, we don't even see any of that really take place. We just see it in the dinosaur sequence, but we don't really see the mass destruction of what can really happen if it actually takes place. With the bringing Cybertron to Earth, at least we see Cybertron partially coming down, and, that in itself is quite a big deal. So I'm going to have to give this point to Dark of the Moon. Moving on. Optimus Prime in Dark of the Moon versus Optimus Prime in Age of Extinction. Well, Optimus Prime in Dark of the Moon is not even really seen that much. I mean, we do see him in some scenes, but I think most of his scenes were really closer to the end of the movie, but he pops in and out of the film, and he does that quite a bit, okay? In Age of Extinction, we see a lot more of Optimus Prime because we start off with Optimus Prime and it ends with Optimus Prime. And because of that, I feel that we really see more of Optimus Prime, especially in the emotional level, because he's a lot more angered, he's a lot more raged in Age of Extinction. So I'm gonna have to give this point to Age of Extinction. The next thing we're gonna score is on the Autobot Team. The Autobot Team in Dark of the Moon versus the Autobot Team in Age of Extinction. In Dark of the Moon, we had a lot of characters. The Wreckers, the new Autobots like Dino and Q, and then a couple of the old members. In Age of Extinction, we got Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, and three new members. I'm gonna have to give the point to Age of Extinction, mainly because I felt the team was tighter. I felt there was more interactions there. I felt that you see a lot more screen time with those Autobots. And then with Dark of the Moon, there was just too many of them to the point where you just see a little bit of them here and there. But I felt a better connection with the Autobots in Age of Extinction based on more of those Autobot interactions. Okay? Next, we're going to score on the Decepticon Team. Dark of the Moon's Decepticon Team versus Age of Extinction Decepticon Team. There is no question here. Dark of the Moon for sure. Because look at this. You got Megatron, you got Starscream, you got Soundwave, you got Shockwave. And even Sentinel Prime, well, he's not a Decepticon, but he joins the villains, right? And then in Age of Extinction, Galvatron, he's here and there. Lockdown, he's cool, but he's not really in league with any of them. So there really isn't a Decepticon team in Age of Extinction. This point is going to have to go to Dark of the Moon. Okay, next, main villain. Sentinel Prime versus Lockdown. I'm going to have to go with Lockdown in Age of Extinction because we see Lockdown at the beginning, we see him in the middle, we understand his motives, and then we see Lockdown at the very end when he gets owned. With Sentinel Prime, his story's a bit of a mystery, but then he really only unleashes his wrath at the end, and because of that, it was cool, but it wasn't as cool as Lockdown. So I'm going to have to say that Lockdown is the better villain, and that is a point that goes to Age of Extinction. Now, the next one I'd like to talk about is Evil Human Scheme. Dylan versus Kelsey Grammer's character. I even forgot his name. I think that the Evil Human Scheme in Dark of the Moon was better in compared to Age of Extinction, mainly because I felt that with Dylan, kidnapping or dealing with Shia LaBeouf's girlfriend or Sam Witwick's girlfriend, there's a bit of that human danger there, and he's kind of conniving. He's scheming. He's somebody who's two-faced. With Kelsey Grammer, we already know that he's a bad guy from the very start, and we know his intentions, but I don't find it is as evil as Dylan. All right, Dylan doesn't care about the rest of human life. He just wants to self-preservation. He only cares about himself. So I'm gonna have to say that the Evil Human Scheme in Dark of the Moon was stronger than that of Age of Extinction. The next thing I'm gonna score it on is New Evil Robots. I'm talking about the new evil robots, okay? And in this case, in Dark of the Moon, it would be the Dreads, and in Age of Extinction, it would be the Prototypes, okay? While the Prototypes did have very cool, or kind of cool, alt modes, like those exotic supercars, in Age of Extinction, I felt the Dreads obviously were the better new villains, better new evil robots, mainly because they had a whole sequence dedicated to themselves. We saw them in the freeway chase, we saw them in the Mexican standoff, and they had their own unique little looks, right? The Prototypes were really quite forgettable. So this score definitely goes to Dark of the Moon. Okay, let's compare the MacGuffins. And by MacGuffins, I'm talking about a physical plot device. Okay, so in Dark of the Moon, it was the pillars. In Age of Extinction, it was the seed. And I'm going to have to give this one to Dark of the Moon, because the pillars, you needed a couple of them, and what they did is that they created the space bridge to bring down Cybertron, and in the middle of the movie, they brought in the Decepticons from the moon. They were hiding in the moon. With the seed, like I said before, you don't really see it active. You don't really see it do anything. It was a tracking device in the end of the movie, and it did something at the beginning of the movie in the flashback scene, but you don't really see it do a whole lot. It's just something that the prototypes and Galvatron were going after, but that's it. Other than that, it's just a prop. Okay, it doesn't do a whole lot. Okay, so this score goes to Dark of the Moon. Now, the next thing we're going to score is on Car Chase. Dark of the Moon's Freeway Chase versus Age of Extinction's Galvatron Chase. This definitely got to go to the Freeway Chase in Dark of the Moon. An amazing high energy sequence, beautifully directed. Love that scene. As for the Galvatron Chase, I mean, it wasn't really much of a chase. It was just a truck versus a couple of vehicles on a short road, and that was it. And all Galvatron did was shoot some missiles, but that is all. There was nothing really that outstanding in that chase. It was cool, but definitely not Dark of the Moon Freeway Chase cool. Dark of the Moon gets the points for this one. Now, Ariel Chase. The wingsuit chase in Dark of the Moon versus the drone chase in Age of Extinction. You guys know that I love the drone ship chase in Age of Extinction. It was something very different, something that we haven't seen before. The wingsuit chase in Dark of the Moon was great. Don't get me wrong, it was really, really great, but it was not even an Autobot versus Decepticon sequence. It was a bunch of drone ships that don't even transform versus a bunch of Special Forces soldiers. It was still very cool. Great to look at in 3D, but the drone ship chase was something very, very different. There was Autobot interaction. It was very, very exciting, and I'm going to have to give the point to Age of Extinction. All right? Now, this one, I don't really know what to call it, but I'm going to call it this. New introduction to beloved characters. I'm talking about introducing characters that we loved from G1, okay? And in Dark of the Moon, it was Shockwave. And in Dark of the Moon, they brought in Shockwave and his Driller Bot. Okay? And Age of Extinction, it was the Dinobots. So in Revenge of the Fallen, they did the same thing, but they brought in the Constructicons. So the big question is Shockwave and Drillbot versus the Dinobots. Which one will I go for? Very, very easy to score this one. Dinobots. Even though the Dinobots were just background characters, I still really, really like the sequence when they were introduced in that scene in the geological park where Optimus fights Grimlock. That was a great introduction, so I'm gonna have to give it to Age of Extinction. Next, I'm gonna score the mass destruction sequence. Okay, Dark of the Moon's building collapse with the Drillbot versus Age of Extinction's lockdown suckage. Lockdown's night ship suckage, okay? Which was the better sequence with mass destruction? Definitely Dark of the Moon's building collapse. That was an intense sequence, okay? I loved every second of that. I thought it was great. I thought it was something where I felt a lot of danger taking place. As for the lockdown suction sequence, I mean, cool. There was a lot of destruction. A lot of things blow up. A lot of things got sucked. But it wasn't nearly as exciting as the building collapse. So very, very awesome. Dark of the Moon gets this point. Next, we're going to move on to Autobot Deaths. Which had the better Autobots deaths? Ironhide and Q in Dark of the Moon, or Ratchet and Leadfoot in Age of Extinction? Ratchet's death was it was a very good sequence. Okay, it was really, really well done because you see that he said he was peaceful. He was trying to he was trying to get away, and finally he got killed. And he was killed by humans, and he essentially finished off by Lockdown. And then Leadfoot was just killed by humans in this really short sequence in a flashback scene, kinda. But Ironhide and Q's death was something that was a little more emotional. Ironhide's death was shocking to me. Like, it was completely shocking. Q's death was sad. You had the sad music going on, and Q, he was just saying that, we're a couple of peaceful old chaps. We want to make love, not war, right? So, I felt really bad for Q's character. He didn't get to do a whole lot, and it was really unfortunate that he died. So I'm gonna have to go with Dark of the Moon. Dark of the Moon gets this gets the point for the better Autobot death sequences. Next is Final Battle: Chicago in Dark of the Moon versus Hong Kong in Age of Extinction. This one definitely goes to Chicago in Dark of the Moon. I'm going to say this mainly because even though both battle sequences were a geographical mess, because you didn't know what was happening where, Hong Kong was even messier. I mean, you went from Hong Kong to China, back to Hong Kong to Detroit, to a fictional factory that doesn't even exist in Hong Kong. Like, it was a big mess to me, okay? And just things took place all over the place, and it didn't feel very cohesive, okay? The Chicago battle wasn't cohesive either, but it was definitely more cohesive and had more of a structure compared to Age of Extinction. In Age of Extinction, it was just a bunch of events that really didn't have any beginning, middle, or end. All right. In Chicago, they had to explain, we got to get from here to here to here to here. All right. Even though there were a couple of random events like the building collapse, but at the end of the day, they had a goal to achieve, and the better sequence definitely goes to the Chicago battle. Okay. Next is boss fight. Which was the better boss fight? Optimus Prime versus Sentinel Prime, or Optimus Prime versus Lockdown? I felt that the Lockdown versus Optimus Prime fight was a lot better. And it's mainly because that Lockdown, we've already seen this build up from the very, very beginning of this movie. And finally they get to fight, and we see that Lockdown is a much stronger opponent. The humans interfered, and Bumblebee as well. But I felt that everything about it worked. Even though I felt that I wished it was longer and we got to see a little bit more of it, maybe just a few more seconds of Optimus Prime versus Lockdown one-on-one battle without any interference. I felt that it was still good, and that fatality at the end was totally appropriate. So this one goes to Age of Extinction. Now we're going to move on to the ending. The ending of both films. In Dark of the Moon, right after the Chicago fight, the Autobots reunite with the humans. Optimus Prime does a monologue, and then suddenly end credits. Very, very abrupt ending, okay? But Age of Extinction's ending was totally WTF. I was like, what the heck? They finish the battle, Optimus Prime does a quick monologue, and then he flies off to outer space, and I was like, what the hell is that? Okay? But I'm gonna have to give it to Age of Extinction mainly because it opens up the story for another film. It leaves it open for a sequel. And, anything can happen. It doesn't mean that the movie ends. In Dark of the Moon, they just, quickly wrapped it up. Okay, battle's over, boom, we're done, end credits. For, at least flying to outer space, it really opens the door to the cosmic realm of the Transformers universe. So, that was definitely a little weird, but I would have to give the point to Age of Extinction. And finally, this is the last point, okay? This is number 20, and that is nostalgia. Nostalgic value, okay? Which one of these films has better nostalgic value, okay? Dark of the Moon, we had the Cybertron sequence. We also got the nod to a G1 episode called The Ultimate Doom, where this evil human scientist, wants to bring Cybertron down. He's in cahoots with the Decepticons, okay? And then there's also Soundwave in it, which is a very, very beloved G1 character, as well as Shockwave, even though we didn't get to see a whole lot of him. In Age of Extinction, there was the Dinobots, there was Optimus Prime's evasion mode, which was pretty cool. That was really great to see him in his G1 truck mode. And then we have Galvatron voiced by Frank Welker, which was great to hear his voice, but we only get to hear a couple of really lame lines, to be completely honest. I mean, the writing wasn't that great, and he had very, very minimal lines. So with Galvatron having very minimal lines, and the Dinobots being used as background characters, I felt that it wasn't strong enough to give us that nostalgic value. So because of that, I'm going to have to give this point to Dark of the Moon. So, I'm going to tally up the points, and after tallying it up, Dark of the Moon gets 12 points out of 20, and Age of Extinction gets 8 points out of 20. Which leaves me to conclude this battle that Dark of the Moon is the better sequel, in my opinion. Okay? Age of Extinction was a lot of fun. I went to see it more times in the theater than I did Dark of the Moon. But after watching it a couple of more times, you see how this film is quite flawed. There's a lot of problems with the story, and there's a lot of things they could have done better in terms of those Transformers moments. Like, of course, having a better sequence for the Dinobots. The Dinobots were really background characters. We waited so long for them to come out, and they only come out at the end, and they were completely underused, just like the Constructicons in Revenge of the Fallen. In Dark of the Moon, you know what, the film felt a little bit more cohesive. It had a beginning, middle, and end, and it wrapped it up a little better. Like, I felt that it was done a little bit better. Age of Extinction, it just felt like quite all over the place. You know, that's the best way I can describe it. It was really just a series of events for the excuse of making big action sequences. And don't get me wrong, both films very, very entertaining. But I'm going to have to give it to Dark of the Moon. I just feel a little bit better connection with Dark of the Moon. Age of Extinction, I find myself, when I decide that I want to rewatch it, I jump straight to the Hong Kong battle. And that's about it. I don't feel the need to want to watch it from the very beginning to the end unless I make it a point to do that. So that's all I gotta say in this video. Once again, I'm gonna say that definitively, in my opinion, Dark of the Moon is the better sequel when compared to Age of Extinction. And I would like to thank Ahmad Haran for presenting this question to me. And because of that, we ended up with this video. And what do you guys think about what I've talked about? Do you agree with my decisions and with my choices? And there you have it. If you look in the description box below, I'm going to leave you with the different scoring criteria. So you can look at it and maybe you can judge it on the comment section and decide which is the better sequel when using this scoring system. You can use that, you could do that on the comment section below, and there you have it. Hopefully in the next video, I will have some new Transformers 5 news updates for you guys. But recently, there hasn't been a whole lot, mainly because they are in the very early stages of writing it. But you know what? We're getting closer and closer to the fall. Like later this year. And eventually they have to give us something. So we're going to have a lot more to talk about. And hopefully you will support me by hitting that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation. Also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. My name is the Alex Yu. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Peace. For example, the actual source, like Paramount, did they issue a press release? Did Hasbro issue a press release? Did Michael Bay say it himself? Did it come from